So now during February, before the State of the Nation address, the Minister of Water and Sanitation, Phemima Jordina, informed South Africans that the government needs about 400 billion to deal decisively with the water problem. That is a lot of money. It is not the only area where lots of money is needed. I know that Transnet needs about 120 billion in the short term in order to solve its own investment and operational challenges. Then PRASA, the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, needs another 120 billion. I know that we need to invest hundreds of billions in the transmission lines for Eskom, because we used to, historically we've drawn our power from the coal belt in Mpumalanga. We've got diverse sources of energy now, so we're gonna need those investments. Now, the South African government does not have that kind of money. We need to accept that it doesn't have that kind of money. Secondly, we have what I call the composition of expenditure problem, which means that we're spending money in such a way that there is very little money left for massive investment in infrastructure. The budget of the money that is collected by the SA Revenue Services, just over 400 billion pays interest on tax, 440 billion goes to social grants, and about 800 billion or 810 billion goes to salaries, for instance. And all of the money that we've collected in the form of tax is gone, or maybe save maybe a couple of tens of billion, basically. So with this composition of expenditure, we are never going to be able to get the kind of monies that we need. At the same time, we need to invest more actually in areas of critical need where South Africans require a lot of assistance. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at Grey Hospital in King Williamstown in Qonce, and the situation was heartbreaking because of the austerity measures that are being applied there. The mortuary at the hospital is supposed to have 3 people working there. It has none. The porters are working part-time in the mortuary. There's supposed to be 5 porters. There's 3. They're now working as porters. They're also working in the mortuary. There's supposed to be 5 people that do laundry and clean the clothing and pajamas of the patients and the linen and so on. Instead of the 5, there are 3 people. The radiology section doesn't have enough people. There is no groundsman. There is no artisan to do maintenance. As a result, the place does not have an occupational health certificate. I can go on and on. So there are clearly areas where we need to invest more money, because it affects immediately the living conditions of South Africans as well as their rights. But at the same time, we need to invest massively in infrastructure, also so that we can catch on the destruction that is being caused to infrastructure by climate change. Now, where I'm coming to is that we can't borrow irresponsibly, because we are borrowing against future generations. At the same time, you have over R1 trillion in cash reserves sitting with South African banks, because South African companies find it difficult to invest within South Africa. Let me make an example. Johannesburg has got severe water challenges. It's a man-made problem. We've known that water infrastructure needs to be maintained. It needs to be built up to accommodate urbanization and so on. And politicians have been over the years negligent and slow to move on these issues and so on. And now we sit here with a crisis that should have been averted many years ago. That is a problem. And therefore, we need to challenge those who've got difficulty with private investment in public goods, need to challenge their ideological dogmas, because you can't have money sitting in somewhere in the economy, in the banking institutions, because the external environment, the local environment is difficult to invest in, and yet you don't want to use that money in order to accelerate investment in the local economy. What I'm saying is that we've got to be prepared to allow private investment in some of our state-owned companies that deal with infrastructure specifically. To me, there is very little material strategic difference between the South African government owning 100% of Transnet and 55% of Transnet. I have no difficulty with local investors and pension funds and so on owning 45% of transport, because in putting in the money, that money is then going to go to what Transnet needs to do. Similarly with other state institutions that we don't want, we want to take 20, 30 years to fix them and never catch up, because ideologically people think that private ownership of some of these institutions is not going to work. For many years, I have made the example of the Volkswagen Group in Germany. The state of Lower Saxony owns about 11% of the Volkswagen Group. The rest is institutional investors like Porsche and pension funds and so on from throughout Europe and the US. So the state of Lower Saxony benefits in the form of a dividend. It also benefits in the form of taxes, as well as both corporate taxes and employee taxes, personal income taxes, and so on. Skills development, technological development, the competitiveness of the German economy, etc., etc., without the government having to also take the risk of 100% recapitalization responsibilities in the event that there is a problem. So when the Volkswagen Group needs to be recapitalized, the state of Lower Saxony has to stamp up 11%. The other 89% comes from other investors. That's being strategically smart. In South Africa, we want to have long ideological conversations when people are unemployed, when people are struggling, and it is difficult to see how these things are going to be paid for within a short space of time, because we don't have that kind of money. So it's important that Parliament and the government and political parties are willing to take tough decisions in order to change the structure of our expenditure, to change the structure of our economy, to accelerate development in infrastructure, in our communities, in the skills of South Africans, so that we can become a competitive country that has got decent living conditions and decent wages. We can't keep doing the things that we used to do many years ago and hope to get a different outcome. So I'm really keen to hear your views on this, because this is my first Substack video that I'm posting. I'm keen to hear your views, and we can have the discussion. I'm going to do a live event soon, and we can have a discussion about these matters.